Summer is gone, here comes fall. Well, I have to say that didn't feel like a summer at all. It's not for lack of trying, or the warmth of a little sunshine. No, it's 'cause it feels like the whole world has lost its goddamn mind.
Today's guest is making sad songs great again. He released his debut full-length album, Lado De Loma, in October 2019. Through his captivating timeless tone and brilliant songwriting, he embodies the spirits of Roy Orbison and Eddie Cochran with a touch of Elvis. Give it up for my good friend, Francis Blume.
Not just the kiddies this year. Oh, and there's plenty of fear. And we could talk about the change in the weather, but what about how we can all change for the better? And all this shit about wolves and sheep, and people being woke and people staying asleep while they bow to the almighty scream. All hail the anxiety machine.
Music-wise, I mean, I know I originally met you through your sister.
Yep.
And then playing in the church.
Yep.
And you were doing that for quite a while. You led worship.
Yep.
Correct. And then how was navigating kind of through a lot of people come from the church? We've talked about this in other conversations. I've talked about this countless times, but I'm just always intrigued in hearing other people's perspectives, navigating kind of coming out of the church into doing their own music.
Yeah. So the church is great, and for a lot of reasons that we've talked about, and I know that you've talked about previously too. The church is great in that sense of it does give you a leg up when you're like a kid that grew up doing music in the church, because you were given, essentially, you look at it just like from a musical perspective, like you have a weekly gig just set in stone for you to get on stage in front of a bunch of people and play.
Yeah.
And like it's under a different banner or like pretense, I guess, like when you're doing it in the church, but at the same time, like physically, whatever it is, spiritually, that is, whatever. But physically, you're there playing chords and singing notes and having to do that in front of a bunch of people, and you're wanting to not suck. So what a lot of other people that didn't grow up in the church, didn't play music in the church, they had to like kind of cut their teeth at bars and stuff like that, like,
which is obviously later in
I mean, they were
too,
even like, I played like my first bar show when I was like 18, like on those nights where they let you in, but like you wore a wristband and you obviously couldn't get any alcohol, or like coffee shops and stuff like that. But also not as consistent, not as easy. Yeah. When you grow up and you're just like, oh, and you're going to some, westernized, Christian or whatever denomination church, and you're like in high school and they're like, oh, you can play 3 chords and like keep it somewhat of a tune. Like, yeah, we'll throw you up there and you can sing these songs that all you have to do is play 3 chords and be able to hold somewhat of a tune and you'll do just fine. But like, so it really is a great place to kind of get your first, your first feeling of like being up on stage and being in front of people and not wanting to suck and learning songs and having to adapt on the fly, when you're young and you're like, oh shit, like I'm capoed right now and I already started the song. Yeah. I'm not supposed to be capoed. And then you like look around and everybody's like, whoa, and your bass player's like,
he's doing algebra.
And like that, all that stuff. You get to do that stuff from the comfort of like a church stage and not like a bar where if you sound bad, they're going to like throw their beer at you.
Sure.
Or laugh and do stuff. You do that from a church and they're just like, oh, well, it was a blessing. You know, even though you sucked so bad.
So good.
It's like, but you just get away with it because of, you know, where you are. So yeah, for that, oh, it was great. So because of that, like I've been playing music like in front of people and like hundreds of people at a time since I was like 17. And even as early as that though, I had my own songs that I would write and play just because, I don't know, I just always wanted to. I didn't really, it's not that I didn't like the songs that, you know, I'd have to play for church. Some of them are great and stuff, but I just always was like, oh, I've got something else I want to say. So yeah, even as early as, you know, 16, 17 years old, I was playing my own songs in front of people on a stage. So yeah, that's kind of like, it's really hard to get that kind of experience like in a different arena, you know, just, yeah. And I did the coffee shop thing too. Played in like, and then some of these North County places, like we were playing, Jumping Turtle was a bar.
Oh yeah, Jumping Turtle.
Yeah, did that one. Pretty sure I played John Mayer's Gravity that night. Which is a great song, but like back in 2008, it was just the most like predictable cover you could do. Metaphor in Escondido.
Oh yeah.
Played there. And yeah, some of these, well, no, both of those venues are gone now.
Yeah.
Those don't exist.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that stuff too. But yeah, the church is really where I learned to kind of hone my musical ability and play with a band and be able to, you know, because you're playing, and so like it wasn't like, so I was like a worship leader. So I chose the songs, like, you know, you go and you talk to the pastor, and sometimes you're playing, you do your first set, and you go back and the pastor, you know, gives a sermon or whatever. And then he's like, hey, you know, I was thinking we could do this song at the end, you know, and you didn't practice that song. Like the band doesn't know that
your band
song.
is all like hearing this in the background going, great.
Yeah, like cool. So then you just have to be able to be like, okay, like boom, like, yeah, I kind of know that song, or like maybe I can go print out the chord chart really quick. And like, so that kind of stuff is, yeah, musically, to develop your chops, like, I don't know if there's a better situation.
Right.
Like, I'm pretty sure, because it's the safest environment to just, like, blow it and
which happens a lot.
Just learn. Yeah. Because that's the thing. You're going to bomb all the, like, that's what's going to happen. Like, eventually you're going to bomb, or like learning, you're going to bomb a bunch. So being able to kind of like learn in that area. And granted, at the time, I didn't look at it that way. Like, that wasn't the way I was viewing it then. Now, from this lens, being like 30 years old and looking back and being like, oh yeah, that was great. Like, you know, but you know, and it was its whole sort of thing, because then back then, the people that I looked up to musically, you tend to want to kind of sound like who you look up to musically.
Yeah.
And not that you're trying to impersonate them, but it just naturally makes its way in. Like if you're playing, you know, I don't know, worship music at that point, you're playing the songs that are being written currently. Whether you like it or not, you kind of end up having to sound like those people.
Yeah, it's the whole like input output kind of a thing.
Exactly. And so that was one of those things where, you know, I kind of ended up not really ever finding my own sound, because I was just always playing everybody else's music. So that's one way where it's not that great, because I could get away with writing, but I wasn't allowed to do like a whole, like, whatever, 5 songs before the sermon of just my songs, because there's no way like the pastor would let that happen. Like, oh, nobody knows your songs. You get your song for like when they're taking the tithe offering or whatever, and nobody's really paying attention anyways. It's like, so that does make it difficult. I don't know. I'm not going to speak like say it does. It did make it difficult for me to find what I truly wanted to sound like, I think. So it wasn't until after I got out of all that and I stopped doing that. That's when I kind of found, okay, like this is what I've always wanted to sound like.
Yeah, and I hadn't heard any of your original music until you started showing me some of the early demo stuff.
Yeah.
For your record Lado De Loma.
Yep.
And I remember you sent me some stuff. I remember we were at Booze Brothers.
Yep.
And you told me and I was like, what?
Yeah.
And you had maybe gone up and played a couple songs after that. And I was like, holy shit. And then you sent me like a Dropbox of like all these songs that were like partially done. And I was like, what is happening? Like, because it's not typical that, at least in my experience, is that when people coming out of that, they had, through the years had put out a bunch of other stuff and kind of like put stuff out that was kind of them finding it it and slow whatever. And you see them come to fruition kind of in front of, or I guess in your ears, but in front of your eyes. And, but it was interesting that it was like, I don't really remember seeing anything. And all of a sudden then there's just this thing that's like, which by the way, like not to like fluff you or anything, but that is one of my favorite records. I listen to it regularly, not just because I've played it with you or any of those things. What's funny is that I remember you showed me that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was like the second song in. And I know that you had told me that you already had someone who's playing drums with you.
Yeah.
And I was like, how do I get that spot?
Get in there.
Yeah. Maddie, I love you.
Yeah.
but it was one of those where I just loved that record so much. And it was just, and it was super cool to kind of watch that unfold.
Yeah. Thank you. I guess it would have been like a far cry from what we had played together, whatever, 9 years previous.
Right.
When we had played at church together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't really, some of the songs on the record I had written, some of the songs on that record are 12 years old, like from 2008, 9, 10. They literally span like a decade of just songs that I had or that I had been writing. And really I just didn't have anywhere to play them. And not like I wasn't going out to go play them. It was by choice. I didn't have anywhere to play them. So, I was writing, and a lot of those I wrote when I was still doing music, like in the church. And none of those are going to fly on a Sunday morning. So, but yeah, and so it was kind of, so what happened was then in 2015, I moved to the UK. My wife and I moved to the UK, and I took a job doing like some youth work over in the UK, in which basically I worked at a skate park and managed a skate park over there, down in like on the border of Devon and Cornwall. And so I went over there, and it's great. Like, I think one of the best ways to kind of change your worldview and to help you grow as just a human being is just leaving. And I didn't know this until it happened, but it's just leaving where you're from and going and being part of another culture and kind of like immersing yourself in that culture. And like, cause I didn't move to like London where there's just all these cultures all over the place. Like, no, I moved to like down in the Southwest, like where like London, they'd say like, it's the equivalent of like, they would look at the people that live down there as like what we look at like Hicks, like out in the sticks somewhere.
Okay.
Like there is just, it's just all locals down there. Or if it's not like locals as in like Cornish or like Devonshire people, it's some British person. But my wife and I were like 2 of 3 or 4 Americans in our like entire little like area, like the village and the town and everything. Like there were not many. So you're really like immersed in a different culture. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I was over there, and that kind of challenged a lot of like my worldview and ways that I looked at. And I was doing youth work, and I was doing work for the church as well over there. But it made me look at things a lot differently. So when we came back, I just kind of like, it's kind of like you come back and you're kind of shocked because you see everything that you grew up in from a totally different lens and like everything. So I looked at like the way that I grew up in, like understanding church and things like that from like a totally different lens. So at that point, when we came back, like we just stopped going to church because we didn't just totally, like we love where we grew up and like our upbringing in church and everything, but we just couldn't vibe with, you know, just couldn't exist in it anymore. It's almost like you peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So we just couldn't vibe with it anymore. So we just, you know, we stopped going. So then at that point, so we came back in like late 2016 and I stopped going to church, which meant I stopped playing music because that was like the only place I was playing music. So then I was kind of just left with like, okay, well, who am I like as a musician? Was I just like a guy that would like do music in the church, or do I really enjoy music? And my guitar sat under my bed for quite a while. I kind of like pick it up and play it and stuff like that. Because right around that time, my son was born as well. So then I'd kind of play music to him and stuff like that and just different things. But and just thumb around. And I wrote a little bit. But that was a moment where I kind of had to figure out like, oh, like what am I doing? And it wasn't on my mind all the time. My mind was basically on like, how do I provide for my wife and child now? Like kind of thing. But I was writing songs. So like Gone for Good, which is a song that's on the record. And it's just, you know, typically, yeah, it's a sad song. Like no wonder, like, you know,
probably one of my favorite songs on the record.
Francis Blume just plays sad music and it's a sad song. But that song was just like, it came back like I'd been back from the UK at that point for like 6 months or something. I was just bummed and just trying to find like a good steady job and just trying to get back like on track, trying to get back in a groove, you know, which is kind of hard when you leave where you've lived for the past 25 years. And we were only gone for a little over a year. Coming back, it's just like, man, you like, how do I get back in the groove of things kind of? And that song just kind of came out and it was just almost like a freestyle. I just like had some chords and like hit voice memo and hit record and then just sang everything that kind of came. And then it was essentially the song. Like I went back and tweaked a couple things in like the bridge, but essentially it was just like, that's it. Like if I showed you like the actual voice memo and then the finished song, you're like, oh yeah, that's pretty much the same. But so I was still writing, but then again, I'm like, what am I doing with this? I don't know where this is going. Like, I don't have anything like, you know, Country Boy. Like that was something that was written while I was over in the UK, but I didn't have any like drive to finish it because I'm like, oh, where do I play these songs? Like they don't exist in the church and I'm not playing anywhere else. So what do I do with all this stuff? And it wasn't until Brad Shaw was like, actually, I think it was Scotty. Scotty shoots a lot of my photos. You know, Scotty Sanford.
I know who he is. Yeah.
So yeah, he was like,
duh. Yeah.
And he's like, hey, like you should hit up Brad and like go, you know, record. And I'm like, I don't know. Like I feel weird, like being like, hey, can I come record? Like, and he's like, just do it. So I texted Brad. I was like, hey, can I come record? And he's like, yeah, come on over and like, yeah, we'll do something. So I went over there and then just started recording those demos. And it was like one night. That's all it took. So I went from all of that big, long, drawn out backstory of, oh yeah, I'm gonna move over to the UK. All that was just like this journey of just like, I don't know where I exist musically. Is it in the church? If it's not, what are all these other songs for? You know, all this stuff. And then it took just one night of going over to Brad Shaw's house in Carlsbad and hammering out like 4 or 5 just acoustic vocal demos and him going like, you know, I think we could do an EP. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, that sounds cool. And I kind of was like, kind of feeling it and was like, man, this is cool. Like, this feels good to be recording again. I hadn't recorded in who knows how long before that point. And yeah, and then it was just like, I drove home that night and I was listening to it because he like bounced him into a Dropbox folder. And I was like listening as I went home. And I was like, man, like, yeah, I think there might be something here. Like, I think I've found a place for these songs to exist. Like all these songs that I've been writing for all these years and having nowhere to play them or nothing to do with them. And so, yeah, it was like that one night. And then it was kind of just like, it turned on in my brain. And then I was like, oh my God, like I could do music. Like I could really do music though. Not just like, playing a church or something like that. Like, because I was done with that. At that point, I was like 2 years removed, done with that. I was like, I'm not doing that ever again. So I just realized like, oh, like maybe there is a reason I've been writing all these songs through these years. And it just kind of, it snowballed. And one thing led to another, and it was just support from people. But I mean, yeah, mainly it was Brad being like, hey, you can record these songs, and then being like, hey, these are good. Like these songs don't suck. And that's all, because I didn't really show people those tunes that I was writing. Like other than like, I think I showed Jonathan Hall a couple like over the years. And even Jonathan, he's like, oh, hey, I really like that song. And I was like, cool. Like, but like, it was never enough to get me like to really take it a step further, I think mentally, but I wasn't in that space mentally until I kind of was back and I'd gone and lived somewhere else and come back. And I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And I kind of had to get to this weird mental space where I was like, and it helped me find. And then, yeah, after that, I just kind of turned it on full blast and was like, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this project? What am I going to call it? And then Francis, and then, the guy on the iceberg, and then Blume, and then, and then I was, next thing, then I'm playing little shows here and there. And then, really just a weird.
So going into that record and the process that you recorded it, like, I know you talked about having previous things that you didn't do shows for, stuff like that. Had you previously had that in depth of like a recording experience, or was that?
No.
So this was going to be kind of the first, like.
Yeah, it was basically, it was 100% the first time that I'd really. So the only time before that I had really ever recorded songs, like a full complete song where they weren't just like demos. So a good friend of mine, Phil, like he and I, we grew up together, and he would always do his own recordings and like his own demos and everything at his house. He had like a little recording setup. And so he and I did a couple songs, like 2 songs.
No way.
That from when I was like, one was I was 17, and then the other is I was 18. So he and I did like 2 like complete songs. All the other stuff we did was like just demos, like acoustic and vocals and just kind of things like that. But the only time we ever actually like went in and did all the instrumentation and actually finished a song where like, here's a complete product. I'd only done it twice before. And yeah. And again, that last time that we did that, I was like 18 years old.
So any of those songs, and that was Phil Wickham.
No, Daniel.
Phil Daniel.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I was thinking Wickham, but
he's
Phil
the other Phil.
The other Phil, yeah. The 2 Phils in the super close proximity.
Daniel's just better.
Yeah. Agreed.
But
did any of those get released?
On MySpace.
On MySpace.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Hey, someone go find those.
They're on MySpace somewhere.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so those were the only 2 that I'd ever like recorded and released. I had done other like just like recording. One of my other friends had lent me like a Mac at one point when I was like 20 years old, and I recorded like Colorado. So the first time Colorado.
Oh, wow.
So that was 2010 when I wrote that, and I did a demo of it, and that's also on MySpace somewhere too. But it was just like I just hit record on the Mac and just recorded.
MySpace when you could just have
Oh
Dude,
my God.
just right
it was
now,
the best.
my head is, I'm thinking through like the band pages on MySpace and stuff like that. Like the way that you're able to have music on there.
It was the best. And I remember like when I first started MySpace or I first got on there were no like music players. You had to embed a YouTube video if you wanted a song on your page. And like you had to really know what you were doing. Because it was all like code.
Yep, you had to figure out how to get the code.
Yeah. You had to like do like low key amateur coding to get your MySpace like shit like on the level. And it was so tight.
That's
I
funny.
loved MySpace. Like MySpace was so good. I still like it better than any social media.
Cannot say that I've stumbled on MySpace and.
Oh no, it doesn't
even
exist.
It doesn't exist.
It's a music only thing now.
It is. Well, they did that well.
Yeah, they did music. It kind of morphed into like a music thing.
The way they had their band pages set up and stuff like that. Yeah. Like thinking about it right now, it is so much easier than like even the way things like Facebook operate now.
Way better. You can go on to like and just listen to like 3 singles that they decided to put out. Like it's really cool. There were still bands that I really liked that were on MySpace that I have no idea where they are now.
So
they might not exist anymore. I used to listen to that all the time. Yeah. Like go on the page just to listen to that song. God, that's like almost analog now compared to today's technology. You can almost call that analog. Like that's as close as like, it's like spinning wax almost.
Millennial wax.
Yeah, that was millennial wax. It was going on. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to go on that. I got to go to my buddy's house because he's got internet and a computer. And I can log into my MySpace there and then go listen to that song. Yeah.
Yeah, my minutes ran out, so I can't use mine this week.
Dude, I was a pay-as-you-go guy.
Dude, we pay-as-you-go. Yeah. We would go, we get those things like the free samples or whatever it was. It'd be like, you know, free 1 hour of like Earthlink or something like that. Oh, and I would go and I would just jack them from all my neighbors.
Yeah.
And so I would have this stack of like the free, you'd have to create a different account every time. I probably got like 300 Earthlink emails out there.
That's insane. Yeah. That's so awesome.
That's a trip.
Yeah. So, so some of that stuff just existed like on MySpace, but yeah, that was really it. That was kind of like, that was all I really did. So then going into the record, like, yeah, that was my recording experience. It was just like, and Phil and I were just good friends. So it wasn't like, oh, I knew a guy that recorded stuff. It was just like Phil and I were always hanging out. And it was like, hey, let's record that song kind of thing. So it wasn't like, it was the most informal.
He was already doing stuff, doing that. So it was like,
and he was the wizard. Like he knew everything. And I just was like, what? You know, I had no idea. And, you know, my first time playing to like, you know, a click and headphones and stuff like that. Which was all great. Like it all really helped shape me, you know, even though I didn't use it back then. Like it was all part of stuff that like I had learned. So then, you know, fast forward 10 years and then I'm, you know, doing that stuff at Brad's and then it was just like, yeah, where do we go from here? Like I did, you know, acoustic and vocals. And then I kind of just started reaching out to people that like I knew that I was still in contact with. Like, you know, Jonathan and we've never been out of contact. So it's like, hey, you know, John G, I'm doing some stuff. And he's like, awesome, finally. Like, how can I help? Like, yeah, you know, I'd love to play on them. Cool. Okay. That day was insane too. The first time Jonathan came up and played and put like lead on a few of the songs. Oh. I think Country Boy might have been the first one we did. Oh man. And I just remember being like sitting outside because it's like Brad has a studio like in the house and I was like outside the slider door and like listening to like what Jonathan was playing and I was like, oh my God, like my songs are actually becoming like real songs because Jonathan's incredible.
Insane.
And he's so good. And so what he did, it like, I was like, oh my, like that sounds like a real song. Wow. That shit's crazy. Just like, oh my God. So yeah. And then it just kind of went, you know, and then Todd came and did some bass. And then, yeah, I sent, you know, demos over to Dan. And he's like, oh, you know, then, so he played on it. And
that's Dan Bailey, by the way. If you listeners out there don't know, that is the dude.
He's very, very awesome dude. And so it basically just came from just a lot of friends, people that I'd known, which is fun, all from church, playing in the church. And they're all just these great musicians. And, them just lending a hand in like the most humbling experience of just being like, oh my God, like that's, and watching like your music, because at that point, and then I was all in. Like at that point, I finally, like I had got my brain to being like, you're doing music and that's what you're going to do. Like it all adds up. Like you're almost like I'm really shitty at focusing on anything that I'm not super into.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've been working all these different jobs and it's like I have to support myself and my family, but like I've never gotten like spiritual fulfillment out of any of those things at all.
Yeah.
So like, but music is like one of those things where, I can think about it 24/7 and just do all, and it's natural. So it's like, okay, those are the things where you find like what you're supposed to do. Like I don't try to do it. It just happens. And if I just kind of like let it, so it's just a very natural kind of thing. And so like, my mindset got there and it figured it out and was like, okay, you can do music, you have to push, like you gotta, and so then, but nothing happens in a vacuum. It was really, that album is just a product of a lot of friends coming around and helping me.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is.
Well, and not just friends, but like friends who also happen to be heavy hitters, like
great musicians,
some of the best.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And,
like insane. Like, and it's just like one of those things where it's like so funny. I'm like, oh, wow, like that is really cool. Like, and again, it's like, all those guys, Jonathan, Dan, Todd, like they would all the same kind of thing. They would say like, oh yeah, we grew up playing in the church.
Yeah.
We grew up playing consistently every single week. So they're all seasoned musicians and they've been playing bi-weekly gigs for decades. Yeah. Like, for realistic and plus rehearsals in between there. Like they're just monsters of music. So it's like, it was, like a lot of credit it's basically due to, I just had songs and it was just everybody else that made it happen.
Well, the other side of this too is that you did have songs, but you had songs that were great, because there's a lot of people that have songs and a lot of people who have friends and all those things. And it's one of those where it definitely takes a combination of all those things. Like obviously for people to give their time, it's not only they just believe in you, but they believe in the songs and they believe in what you're doing, obviously too. So that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
For people to want to put their name on it and all of those things. And so that's,
and that's what I'd hope, like, cause I consider myself like a pretty nice person. So I'm like, I hope they're not just like, he's a nice guy, so I'm going to help him out. I hope it's like, oh, they really enjoyed playing on the songs. Cause you're like, man, am I just getting by because I'm nice? Like, and they all hopped in on this. But, and that's a whole nother thing. And then you start thinking like, cause so the record, so it was February 18th, 2018. So that was the day that I went and recorded demos. And the album didn't release until October 19th, 2018. So it took almost 2 years is what I'm trying to say. Like it was
it was 2018?
2018 was when I started those demos. And then it didn't, so the beginning of 2018,
but it came out,
I didn't release it until the fall of 2019.
Yeah.
So like 20 months.
Yeah.
Oh, no, October 18th was when it came out. So it was 20 months exactly is what it was. So, the record almost took 2 years to make.
Yeah.
And again, there are other people that I met along the way that came in, that, played on the record too. There's, Neighbor Dan on trumpet.
Neighbor Dan,
dude. He's the man. Shout out to Dan Eastwood. and he went and he played trumpet. And then there's another guy, Mario, that played trumpet on Sad Boy. I mean, there was probably, even my father-in-law came in and played accordion on Amsterdam Effect. There was like, all said and done, there were like 20 different musicians that ended up playing and or singing. Like Lauren Grace, she came and did some harmonies as well. Yeah, there were so many people, that came in and kind of helped like along the way and just put little pieces together. But it took a long time. Like 20 months is a long time to work on a record.
I remember when you had shown me kind of where stuff was at then, and you were obviously like all of the main stuff was there, and you were just trying to figure out how to get the last pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with you too, like being like, dude, this shit needs to like get this out so people can hear it already.
Yeah. It was just one of those things, like, and it was cool. And it was Brad's integrity as well as the producer. Like he heard certain things and he was like, and it was great because he and I were kind of in sync of just like, we weren't going to release it until we knew like we had all the pieces that we had heard in our head.
Yeah.
But doing like a total DIY record, no label. Meanwhile, I'm working a full-time job at the same time with a wife and child. So I'm working for all those 20 months, I'm working, 9 to 5. And then 3 days a week, I'm like at least 3, sometimes more, sometimes less, leaving from work, going straight to Brad's and then being there till like 10, 11 at night and then coming home and then doing all. So like my wife is just an absolute angel for supporting me through all of that and like allowing that to, or not even allowing, that's like a lame word to use. She didn't allow, she encouraged and, supported me in that. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different factors for why it took so long. But it's kind of just, it's one of those things where it's like, it was the only way it could have happened. It's the only way we could have got the product that we got in the end. Yeah, there's this dude in the UK that did like the strings and stuff, and he's wild. That dude was so wild. He's awesome. His name was William, but then again, he said that William may or may not be his real name or something. But he was amazing though.
It's almost as mysterious as Blume.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, that's actually his surname. That's his last name. No, I'm just kidding. Or am I? That might have been his last name, and that's where I got it.
Oh God.
But so yeah, it was just like, I don't know. It was one of those things that was. You know how they say like it's not like a lightning in a bottle thing because that happens real fast. Like this was just like the opposite of lightning in a bottle. It's everything happening really, really slow.
Yeah. But
all ending up in the right place.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I don't know if lightning in a bottle, that saying has to do with the speed of the lightning, but whatever.
I don't know either. I have no idea.
Stupid saying anyways. But all the things ended up, amounting to the right way. And I think we were happy with what we were able to put out. But when you put a record out like that and it takes you that long, by the end of it, by month 20, you look at it differently than you did at month 2 and month 6 and month 10.
And if you're lucky, you still
15.
Love it.
And it at the end of it, because of Brad and his integrity and things and his ability as a good producer, I did like it and I did love it by the end of it. I was like, you know what? I think we put out, a good record. And I think, man, we did like our very best with what we had. Granted, we had some great assets there, just mentioning those players, like some great musicians. And yeah, we definitely didn't take it for granted. Yeah, so put that out in October of last year. And then, we were talking about getting ready and we were like, oh, maybe we'll do like spring tour and stuff like that and go up the coast and all that. And then
Oh
shit. Friday the 13th.
Friday
that was
13th.
Our last show.
It was.
That was our last show. It was Friday the 13th in March.
Dang it.
We played at Black Plague.
Black Plague. Okay.
Yeah.
In my head, I was thinking like not Winston's. What was that other place?
Oh, the one down in yeah. No, it was that same week though. That was a busy week. We did that one, and then we did the Nashville benefit at Moose Lodge, and then the next night we did.
That's right.
Yeah, Black Plague.
Yeah, I forgot about that because the Nashville benefit. I'm actually glad you brought that up because that's what in my head I think of.
Yeah,
as being that, but that was a Thursday.
Yeah,
and it was Thursday. The 12th.
Yep.
And then we did the Friday the 13th.
That was a big old bash though. That was fun. The Nashville one was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
That was good.
I was really glad we got to do that. We got to squeeze it in because I know it was getting tricky.
It was.
It was kind of one of those, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen?
Yeah, it was totally. And then we had the Casbah book for the next weekend.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then that's when everything started to cancel.
That's when it was all gone. Yeah. So that was wild. Mm-hmm. So it's like I still kind of, since everything kind of just got put on pause, I'm almost like, do I still look at that record as like, I still have to tour it, you know, because I know like I still would have to tour that record because I didn't.
Right.
Like it didn't, I barely got to play it.
You need to.
Yeah.
Never.
Like I barely got to play the album out after like post release. So I kind of look at it as I'm like, man, now, you know, and I've just been writing, but I still have I have no intentions of like going back into the studio to start anything as far as a second
fully
record.
Like complete
until like really feel
until you feel like you've done that one
Yeah,
justice.
exactly.
Like, yeah,
because it's still just like, I mean, it's hit such a tiny audience.
Yeah,
like it's just hit like what, North County, San Diego, some of South, like, you know, and I mean, streaming wise, yes, your songs get all over the world.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, cool, I have listeners in like North Korea. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, and no, I really mean that. Cool. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, glad you guys are getting down. That's rad. But like, I haven't actually gone and like played it for anybody outside of.
And it's a record that needs to be played and it needs to be experienced that way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like having not only just played, but being someone on the other side watching it as well. It's one of those, it's just all those songs are just songs that are great to experience live and they deserve to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I love playing those songs live. I mean, those are all the songs that like, I mean, I haven't played a full band show since Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
If I did, you know, I love playing those songs. Man, we had some steam going too. We had new songs we were starting to incorporate in there too. Kind of getting ahead of it though. I was like already playing new songs before I'd really actually.
I mean, it just happens. Well, I would say too, is like, one of the things I noticed with you, I was interested to see what was going to happen after the record came out, as far as, because my experience is that, especially when it's like a first record, and I think you kind of mentioned this too, like a lot of these songs are songs that you've had for years. Mm-hmm. And it's not like, oh, I wrote these songs last year and these go on a record. Yeah. It's like, here's my songs, that my lifetime of my best hits of all my songs, essentially, and they go on a record. Yep. And I've found that for a lot of people, what happens next is kind of the most pivotal thing. Yeah. Because now you've kind of drained the swamp as far as like all your stuff. So now what are you going to do? Yeah. And I love like the stuff, like the way, like, well, one, I mean, obviously you did the iPhone's covers. Yeah. Which was rad. And then you started doing like these seasonal things, which again, I want to tap into that shortly, but you want
me to talk about iPhone covers?
Yeah, at some point. I want to talk about just the recording process for that. Yeah. And like all of that. But the songs that you did, your originals, like the seasonal ones you wrote, like they're just so well done. And like you write, like there's always like this clever spin in your writing and the way like lyrically and musically it matches, like the way you match all those things. Yeah. It's so well done that it was one of those things where I was like, oh, this dude's got songs for days. Like, well, I'm just saying that like some people I worry, like I do, I'll go and I'll worry. Like we did all your songs. I'm worried that you might not have a bountiful of ones to come
Is
down
the well
line.
Going to fill up again?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was, but I think that was like maybe the one or two of those. And I was like, oh, okay, this guy's not gonna have any freaking problem with that.
Yeah. So there were songs that I hid from Brad that he was like, dude, what the fuck? Like, you're hiding songs from me? Like, why didn't you pull that song? Like, so Can't Pretend is a song that's on Lado De Loma. Mm-hmm. It's like the only like just acoustic one. And I hid that from him for like a year till like towards the very end. And he was like, what do you, that, like, we got to put that on the record too. I'm like, cause the record was already like 14 songs.
Yeah.
It started out as like a 5-song EP. And then I was like, oh, I got this one too that I wrote. And he's like, okay, well, there's another one. And then it came to the point where he was like, what else you got, kind of thing. Yeah. And so, and so I hid a few. And so there's still some that like, you know, I kind of kept back. But as far as like the seasonal tunes, like so I guess I could touch, I don't know. Do you want me to go? I mean, if chronologically, do you want me to, should we go to iPhone covers or?
We could do both, but I was kind of touching on your songwriting stuff, on your style, just because there is something to be said about, I feel something and I'm writing a song out of this thing. Whereas you did something that I feel like a lot of people don't have as much of a power to do, which is to write something with intention.
Oh, commentary.
Kind of. With commentary, but like being like, okay, it's Christmas. I'm going to write this Christmas song and I want to say this. And it's all, so it's going to be Christmas. I'm going to say all these things.
Yeah.
And that's the part that like, that's just a great craft to be able to like to put that together.
Okay. So then, the bar that I kind of,
which by the way, you could talk about the recording of iPhone stuff because to note these songs when you go listen to them, into fall, into summer, into spring, they are all recorded on his phone. So I'm just saying 6S. That now. iPhone 6S, not even a new fancy phone, the iPhone 6S.
It's the iPhone 6S.
All right, so I'm just putting that out there so when we are talking about this, you understand that that's what's happening.
And then like people tend to ask like, oh, like what microphone? It's just the iPhone microphone. Just like the same one you talk to your grandma into.
Like on speakerphone?
Like this just is the iPhone microphone. I just record straight into the iPhone mic. I plug in old headphones. Because you have to plug in old headphones that don't have the speaker.
They don't have a speaker.
Because that mic, or the mic that's on the little dangle thing, you know, like the ones you get on your dangle.
The dangle.
That mic sucks if you want to record songs with. But you have to use old headphones. Anyways, but we can talk about that in a second. But the songwriting, like, so then I think, so I hold a pretty, and I don't say that I attain this, but I think I've always tried to hold like a very high bar for songwriting. Like the Beatles are, in my opinion, are the greatest band that's ever existed.
Don't go listen to my podcast with Chad.
I'm like, at what point did you talk with him about that? Because I'm like in like the first like quarter of it.
Stop.
Okay. God. So for me as a songwriter, I look at and it always changes. Like, okay, which Beatle is your favorite? You know, it's like that'll change with you with what stage of life you're in.
Oh God, this is some serious Beatle nerdery.
Oh, I will get so nerdy. But okay, and I'll kind of like condense it. But the Beatles, and let's just pick Paul McCartney for instance. So Paul, and let's just pick the White Album. So Paul can have Blackbird and Helter Skelter on the same record, right? Man, like the songs couldn't be more polar opposite. Like one is a song, a beautiful folk, melodically driven song about the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And then the other is just a song, he just wanted to play the loudest song because he heard that The Who had recorded the loudest song that's ever been recorded. And he was like, well, shit, now I want to record the loudest song. So he wrote Helter Skelter, and there you go. So you've got those two, like, you got Blackbird and Helter Skelter. And then you've got like Martha, My Dear, and Honey Pie, and these things in between, right? So like you look at all that, all the different things that he can say as a songwriter, the different things he can make you feel. And that's just one Beatle out of the four, and let's just call it three, because the three were really the songwriters, John, Paul and George. But anyways, but as a songwriter, being able to take you and make you feel all those different things and be able to speak on all those different things, like that is just like an incredible thing. You know, Rocky Raccoon. Okay, there's a ballad, there's a story, there's like an old, you know, and so I love that. But so those are kind of like, and what I'm saying is that they're bars that I don't attain, but like that's the bar. I would say, okay, that's the bar I want to hold my songwriting to. I want to be able to say, okay, I don't want to just be a one-trick pony and just write the same kind of song. I want to be able to write 2 songs and have them both exist on a record and have somebody like, what are these both doing on the same record kind of thing? Like talking about different things, totally different emotions, totally different genres even. I mean, not so much different genres, but in a way. And so that's like, so that would be, you know, kind of that's the goal I look to, I guess. And so when you have a goal that high, there's a lot underneath to explore for me. Like, it's just like, okay, that's unattainable. So I can kind of just like feel the freedom to just kind of go all around and try and pick pieces out of anything and try and write it into what I think can be a coherent song at that point. But that's kind of what that's the secret. I'll tell you that. That's more of a secret than where Blume came from. I will reveal that one. That's like what I'm trying to attain all the time.
Okay.
I'm not going to get there, but like that's where my brain's at when I'm writing these songs, and they will fall so far short of Blackbird and things like that. But that's what I'm trying to get, because that's what like keeps me going. Like and since I was a kid, like that's what has really like inspired me. And like where I felt music, and just like I think I just experienced it in a very unique and special way, more than like a lot of even my friends at the time. But growing up, I mean. So I think I don't know. And then another person that kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different like kind of ways of songwriting craft as well. And now all that to go back, okay, talking about craft of just being able to write, you know, and being able to think about and kind of talk on something. I love Father John Misty, and I love the way that Josh Tillman can just kind of, the way he can talk about things. And he talks about things so conversationally in his lyrics. And that's definitely like a page that, I think that's a page I pulled out for these specific, like these seasonal ones I've done, is just instead of being more like a narrator, a more just like a conversation commentary on like what's happening. So I was, you know, pandemic hit. So all of our conversation, here's where we're tying it in. Released Lado De Loma, cool, we were playing some shows, pandemic hit, everything shut down. I'm working from home. I'm sitting at home. So March 13th was the last day that I went into the office and worked my job. And then after that, I've been working remotely since. And so then I was just at home, you know, like looking around and just like, okay, it's just a couple weeks while we flatten the curve. And I love springtime. Like I don't really care about fall. Winter, even less.
Yeah.
Spring and summer are my jam.
Okay.
So spring hit, and I was so excited for spring. I'm like, oh my God, like we spring forward, we get longer days. Like that's what I want, right?
Yeah.
And that spring 2020 was just like the most, just kick you in the balls.
Most unspring spring.
Oh my God, dude. Yeah. And I had records. Jonathan had showed me this record, this Waysblood record that had come out like a few months prior. He's like, oh, you got to listen to this. And I remember telling Jonathan, I was like, oh man. And I'd listened to it all the way through. I was like, that record's so good. I'm going to wait until like time change and like till spring really comes in, you know, and I like, you smell the jasmine and stuff like that. And like really, cause like I love to associate all that stuff with new music when I find it, you know, and cause that's the way I am. Like music is so, yeah. Anyways. So anyways, I was just really looking forward to spring, and, you know, and not to sound like, but anyways, yeah, that's where my head was at. And then everything kind of hit, and I was just like, God damn it. Like, there it all goes. And then I was just out, like, you know, kind of like taking my self-imposed breaks from work, where you kind of walk away from wherever you're working, kitchen table or whatever, and I just go in the backyard to soak up some sun, because it's March and it was rainy and cold and the sun was out, that, and just started, you know, thumbing through and playing a song. And I just kind of started to talk about, like, okay, what am I thinking about? Like, and the sentiment was like, I just want all this shit to go away. Like, I know, and not in an insensitive way, you know, I know people are suffering and things like that, or people are getting ill, and people are losing their jobs and things like that. And more of a reason, I'm like, I just want this to blow away. Not like in an ignorant, but as an artist, you can just say, you can heart on your sleeve kind of thing. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to explain that. I understand that you're feeling pain and stuff like that. So I'm not trying to, like, discredit that. I'm just saying, like, God damn, like, this sucks. And I just want it to go away. Like, I just want to go back to what, like, the track that we were on kind of thing, you know, and that's where my brain was. And so I started writing that tune, you know, winter changes into spring, and, you know, and then it kind of came in, and it became a song. And I was like, oh, you know, I like that song. And I had done, and at that point, like, I was kind of staying hunkered down. I wasn't going to go over to Brad's and record a song because I was, like, being super cautious.
Yeah.
Back in March.
We were told to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm staying in my house. I'm not going over to anybody's house and recording. So I have this song and I like what it's saying, and I feel like I want to release it, but how can I do it? And I was like, oh, well, I did do the iPhone covers thing where I just recorded all that stuff on my iPhone. Like, maybe I'll just do that. Which would tie into, really quickly, I'll explain the iPhone covers. When you take 20 months to make a record, you get antsy. And I just wanted stuff to release. I released Sad Boy, and between Sad Boy and the release of the record was about a year. Yeah. So usually it doesn't take a year for between the single and the album to come out. I mean, maybe sometimes it does. I'm no expert.
And not often.
But not often. So I was antsy. And every time I had come up with a demo for a new song or whatever, an old one that I decided to show to Brad, my producer, I'd record it on my iPhone and send it over. And he was like, you know, it's, like, funny. These recordings sound pretty good, you know? So I was like, okay. So then I ended up I had some different, like, covers that I had recorded on my phone. I ended up releasing them because I got antsy and was like, I want something to release. So while the record's being finished, while we're doing different things and gathering all the different instruments from all over the freaking world that we can get, these random dudes in the UK that are recording strings and sending back over and not telling us their real name and weird shit like that. It's like, okay, I just put out an album of just covers just to so before the album comes out, like, hey, this is the kind of music I'm inspired by. You might be surprised. There's no Elvis or Buddy Holly or Roy Orbison on the iPhone covers. It's Arcade Fire and, like, White Stripes and stuff like that. But anyways, so having done the iPhone covers thing and having released an album solely recorded on my iPhone 6S with, you know, backing vocals and instrumentation and different things like that.
Yeah, we're not talking guitar and vocals. We're talking like a full production.
Piano and stuff that, like, different. Yeah. So I was like, well, I'd done it before and people seem to enjoy it. So why don't I do that with this song? So I went and recorded Into Spring and then put it out, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, you know, I'd said what I wanted to say, and musically, you know, tying it back to, like, okay, you put out a record of basically your greatest hits from the past, like, 10 years, because that's exactly what it was. You nailed it when you said that. It's like, oh, there's my greatest hits. How do I write now in this stage? And I really enjoy the way that, like, movements in music and even, like, changing time signatures within a song. Not much for, like, modulation and stuff like that, because it's for, like, 90s rock, but no, I'm just kidding. Or 90s ballads.
Yeah. Or, like, random old country shit.
Yeah.
To do that
Yeah, things like that. Yeah. Actually, you know, modulation, everybody gets into modulation. Maybe I will too. But But like, just the way that, and it's specifically even like, yeah, I just like the way that as you go through a story and what you're trying to say, even if it's not narrative, just as you walk through a sentiment, like your train of thought, if the music can match that, it just makes it all the more potent, and not, necessarily as corny as like, I go to the minor 6 when I say something really sad. Like, oh, because that gets them right in the feels. But like, not that, but like if you kind of go that way and the music follows your lyrical content and it just kind of happens that way, like that's a great thing. Like it's a great thing to be able to kind of hone in on.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you look at the Beatles or Paul McCartney and stuff like that, I'll use one of his songs, She's Leaving Home from Sgt. Pepper. And this might have been George Martin, their producer, because he's an absolute genius. He's the 5th Beatle. But where it talks about, in the song of the narrative, it talks about the mom finds out that the girl has run away from home. And she says, Daddy, our baby's gone. And when it says like the parents realize their kid has run away, it hits the minor. And then the strings start going staccato. So it implies like stress and anxiety and fear and sadness. And like that kind of thing moves you as a listener. So to get to the point where like maybe as a songwriter, you can get past, this is what I'm trying to say, but like this is also like sonically and melodically how I want to say it, to convey like, so maybe I don't have to say like, man, this sucks, I'm sad. But I can say something that like maybe saves face lyrically, and it sounds like things are cool. But if you really kind of like underline, like musically, it's like, oh, maybe it's kind of that thing like where somebody's like, how are you? You're like, I'm fine. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're not fine.
Yeah.
But it's underlined like that. So that kind of, I think that's so fun.
Yeah.
Like songwriting wise. And you get into that. And so
you did that. A good example of that is Amsterdam.
Oh yeah.
Like the way, like you talked about that stress point and stuff like that.
So
like the journey of that song it totally is that all through and through. It's just like,
you're just kind of floaty. When the story behind that song is I smoked way too much weed in Amsterdam. First time smoking weed, a novice at 26. And I smoked like a whole joint, just like boom, right down to the butt, like just straight all the way. And I was like, oh man, like, I didn't feel anything. And then I finally got to the end and then I was like, oh my God,
I'm dying.
Done.
Yeah.
And then I wrote that song like while I was still kind of high. And it was like, so that idea of, you're kind of floaty, you're here. And then by the end of it, then the paranoia sets in.
Yeah.
And you're, that kind of idea. And I think that's really fun. Like as a songwriter, I think there's so much more. I think, I believe in art. Music is art. Art is subjective. And for me, I like almost how I say something to be more potent than like what I said. There are things where you can say something snappy and it's just right there. But there are a lot of times where you can just imply things that keep people coming back. And for me as a listener, that's what I've always liked. Like say, for instance, that She's Leaving Home, where it's like, oh man, like, as a kid listening to it, I wouldn't have noticed that. But as an older, teenager or adult, I was like, oh my God, like that's beautiful. Like that's really cool.
I'm realizing I need to go back and re-listen too.
You mean like the Beatles?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We can have that conversation unless you want to have like a 7-hour podcast. We can have that conversation. In fact, shit, I'll write it up. I'll just write up like a whole thesis.
Yeah, send me a thesis on it, and
it'll be I'll do it. But so what was cool though is that these, I did Into Spring, and that was cool, and I kind of said, and then another time, it was in like July, and then I just released that one song, and I was just like, okay, I had no intentions of releasing anything else. But then come late July, it was my first time playing a show back out. and it was Vineyard. And it was because of you.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, do you want to play at this awesome place? And, you know, it's all outdoors and everything. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. But the night before the show, I remember being like kind of stressed just because I just, you know, you get to this point where, and I'm a pretty like, you know, to a certain extent, not being like insensitive, but like I'm a pretty like IDGAF as far as like trendy or any kind of like, I don't want to be accepted like in the common cool like sway of whatever is out there at the time. Like,
right.
I don't care. Like I'm going
to the latest
exactly
social
and
media
like,
hashtag.
I don't like, I'm going to back. And so I was like, okay, you know, I agreed to playing the show, but I'm like, man, I had that thought and that stress of like, how's this going to look that I'm going back out at the end of July? Cause it was like July 20 something, 24th or something. How's that going to look? Like, what are people going to think that I'm going out and playing music for people together again? And granted, they're all outdoors and sitting at their own places, all spaced out, as they would have been pre-pandemic, all more than 6 feet away anyways, but all outdoors in the great, you know, Fallbrook countryside. And I just started to have that kind of thought of just like, oh man, like, are people just going to be like, what are you doing? You know, you're going to kill people or something like, you know, I was just like, what are people going to say, you know? And so I started just like, you know, those thoughts were kind of going through my head. And I, you know, the night before, and my wife and I, we put our son to bed and we're just kind of hanging out, standard night, like watching The Office reruns or whatever. Office is always reruns. I don't know why I said that, but I mean, we've seen it like 10 times. So yeah. And just sitting there and kind of, okay, and we're done with that. And, you know, she's like, oh, you know, we're gonna go to bed. And I'm like, I'm just gonna stay up a little bit longer. Like I kind of got something and I kind of grabbed, and I started picking through this like super predictable, almost like grossly predictable little like folk medley kind of thing or melody on the guitar. And I just kind of started kind of like talking through what I was feeling, you know, talking about like putting yourself out on the line and like, have I given this thing enough time? Like, or, you know, should I go through, or is it still too fresh a wound? Like, are people gonna, you know, is it too fresh? Like are people gonna jump down my throat because I'm just gonna go play some music to people? Like those were things that were really going through my head. Like, you know,
real life actual concerns.
Yeah. Where you're just like, man, I don't want to like, you know, bum people out, but also like some people are really like wanting to go listen to somebody play music.
Yeah.
And it was just, and I kind of came to terms with how I'd been feeling and just like feeling like, man, I'm not going anywhere. Like, and not as like playing the victim. There are people that had so much harder situations. I was able to keep my job through all of this. And like, I'm extremely fortunate, and people have had it much harder than me. But again, as the artist and as somebody who writes in whatever facet or expresses yourself through any means, you're allowed to just put your heart out there and write how you feel. So I was like, you know what? Because then I was like, even had like that writer's kind of like syndrome where I'm like, oh, is this too like woe is me, where people have gone through things much harder? But it's like, well, that's not your job necessarily as the artist. Like, you just write what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any plans of putting it out or anything. I just was like, I'll just like go through, like keep writing what you're kind of. And so that night I wrote a song that ended up being released as Into Summer. And it's just talking about how you like kind of feel like you're going nowhere and nothing's right. Nothing really seems like it's right, but it's not quite as bad as it could be, kind of thing, you know? Because for me personally, it wasn't as bad as it could be. Some people it might have been, but for me, it wasn't as bad as it could be. So, you know, and I did that. And then the next morning I woke up and kind of like listened to the voice memos, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I recorded a little demo on my phone and sent it over to Brad. And I was like, you know, don't make fun of me. I kind of did like a folk, I kind of broke into like folk acoustic-ish, like kind of genre. And he sent back the Dropbox. He's like, I mastered it, put it out. It's like, and I named the song Summer 2020.
Yeah.
And he's like, just call it Into Summer. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a good idea. So I did that. And then I was like, okay, well, now I'd put two of those out. I did spring and summer. And I was like, well, if I don't do fall, I'm a chump. And again, though, so it's like I can't force a song out of me, but I have to wait till I get to the point where I'm like, man, like what's going on? So then, God, if Fall didn't give you as a songwriter,
oh God,
if that didn't fill the well, then like your well's got a leak.
Yeah, big leak,
like a big old leak. Because like I was just like,
I was so excited for that.
It's like I got some shit to say now.
Yeah.
Like, so, anyways, just kind of kept it rolling, and then yeah, that's what I just showed you. Into Winter.
Yeah, Into Winter.
And Into Winter.
Yeah, I got a sneak peek of Into Winter, and it is good and wintry.
It's just a real sad Christmas song. But yeah, but what I really like about these songs and doing everything by like on my own and kind of being able to be my own producer and everything and being limited in that way, like where I don't have that, the same ear that Brad does, who produced Lado De Loma and everything I did previous. But it really is like, it gives me, it kind of puts the reins in my hands and granted, yeah, I did it for the iPhone covers, but those are kind of easy when you're doing somebody else's song. You can get away with kind of like, oh, it's just my interpretation. But when it's your song, it was like a lot more where I'm like, man, like I do get to be my own producer. I get to decide what instrument, like how I put here and how I want things to kind of sit and like how I want it to sound. And I get to mix it all myself. And like, so of course I mix my vocals up nice and loud. louder, louder, because that's what everybody wants when they write the songs. Yeah, can you put my vocals up in the mix? So anyways, but it was good, and it got me to that mindset where then I could maybe write more snappy lyrics and more commentary on what's going on, which was really fun. Like I really enjoyed it.
But you do it so cleverly. You do it so well. That's the thing. It's like it's one of those where like I just laughed because it was like one of those things where like I remember when I heard the Into Fall and you sent it to me.
Yeah.
Because I had posted something that was less clever and it was more frustrated and like just straight to like the and so when you sent it and I was listening to it and I was just like, like, I wish I was able to say things in a way that hid the frustrations a little more.
Yeah.
In the sense of it was just that. And I just admire that ability to just make something, to be able to say things so poignantly but to be able to do it in a way that's not like aggressive.
Yeah. And, well, I appreciate that because that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I'm like, is it too aggressive? I'm like, is that not
so
aggressive
good.
enough? Like, are people going to understand what I'm saying?
I highly recommend you go listen to it. All of them, but Into Fall is just so good.
But it was just like, I don't know. It was the idea in it. So truth be told, I write a lot of those. So, okay. Into Spring, I wrote that at the house or whatever, and then into Summer on the couch. Into Fall, I wrote most of it driving around in the car, and which is another way where I kind of write a lot of songs driving, so I write them a cappella. A lot of my songs, even all the way back to the ones that I was talking about that were on Lado De Loma that are like 10 years old, I write a lot of them while I was driving, and I just record and I sing a cappella, and then I go home and I find chords that support the melody.
You figured it out that way. Interesting.
So a lot of times the chords will have a very like Into Fall, if you're like a bassist or a guitar player that's going to have to follow all my chord changes, you'd be like, dude, I hate you. You son of a bitch. Like there's nothing. And Into Winter, the one that's going to come out again, you'd hate it even more because it doesn't follow like a standard chord progression because I'm writing chords to support a melody that's just written off in space somewhere. Like, so that kind of thing is fun too. And I guess that's one of the ways that I've kind of always written. Not
having to follow a form.
Yeah.
That the verse might have this thing and then go into the next one. It might not.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I know that from stuff when we were working on some of the newer songs.
Yeah.
And I remember we'd be talking about something and be like, oh, well, it should go to this. And you'd be like, that's why I don't want to do it.
Yeah. Because, and it's like those.
You're like, nope.
Some of those things where it's like, it kind of makes it too predictable.
Yeah.
And there are some things, like I feel like a lot of the times I do, I kind of write almost like honestly to like the critic's ear, because I want not just like the average listener to be like, oh, that's good. I want like a musician and I want a producer to go, oh, like that was cheeky. Like I heard what he did there. Like I want that. But then again, if you can do that, if you can write movements and if you can compose musically, and I mean, not to sound too like, high up on some like soapbox or whatever, but but if you can do that, then in turn, what you can do is you can give the listener's unsuspecting ear something that they don't know why that sounds cool. They don't know why they like it, but it's not getting repetitive. It's not necessarily like, oh yeah, he did. So the chorus, the chords changed on the chorus. The melody stayed the same, but the chords changed. So something behind there sonically keeps the listener's ear going like, yeah, it's the same, but not. Right. And they have no idea why.
They don't. Yeah.
But like it keeps you engaged rather than it just being
because if halfway into a song, they can now predict the song.
Exactly.
And if you can't predict the song, you are now more engaged in the song.
Yeah. It causes just the person that's unsuspecting that has no idea about anything musical. And I'm not like, I don't know music theory very well at all. Like I'm still learning a lot, but like it catches the listener's ear, like the unsuspecting listener's ear. And if you can catch them with that, then you kind of got something, because you can kind of keep them coming back. And then in turn, then you're also pleasing the suspecting ears, right? The ones that are going to listen, that are like, oh, is it just going to be the same formula over and over? Or is he going to instead take that minor and go to the major on the next verse just to like, what the hell was that? But that's a lot of things. I just rip that because that's what the Beatles did. And that's what George Martin was like, hey, like do this. And, and that stuff that they did, that is what, you go back and like you're saying, like you go and you listen to a lot of that stuff. Yeah. And you're like, oh my gosh. Or, a lot of those things. I mean, we could talk about.
Well, that's what's interesting, and not to keep bringing up the Beatles situation, but I will say that like, I never heard anyone talk about the Beatles the way that you talk about the Beatles. Oh. And that's very clearly, that's like a huge influence and something you've spent a lot of time. Like I have music that's like that for me though too, where it's like, I can talk for 3 days about records from so-and-so and whatever. Yeah. And they're just, but they started off as things I was just drawn to first. And then I just fell in love with them, and falling in love with them, I did that. Yeah. I unfortunately didn't have that growing up. Yeah. Like growing up, the Beatles were not played in my household. Okay. Yeah. So it was something I had to go back and like listen to. And then when I did, it was just like okay. Yeah. It was like,
it's always been there kind of thing. Yeah. Even though you didn't look for it. Like there's such a giant thing. They've just kind of always been there.
Yeah. And so it didn't have the thing that, it's one of those things where I went and I respected them historically. And for everything that kind of like foundationally, and so many of those aspects that are just the very generic things. Yeah. But it just was, it didn't do that. Granted, also I'm not a singer and a songwriter. And so like, there's a lot of aspects of that may just be over my head too. Yeah. But it is interesting hearing the way you talk about that, because it is. And I imagine too, for when I start talking about, whoever to be someone who's like, I don't even know who you're talking about. Yeah. And I doubt that they have the interest that anyone is ever going to have, but but hearing you talk about, it's like one of those, like, I love that. Yeah. Like all those little nuances and all the little details that are in there that I just missed. Yeah. And so that's like one of those things that makes me want to go, all right, I need to dig them out.
That's, what's funny is I've had the same thing with my friends that I've talked to about the Stones. So, and that's the thing, the Stones, they're just that giant entity that's always been there. And I like some Stones songs. Yeah. Like, and I'm like, oh man, yeah. I like the Rolling Stones are a great band. Yeah. But I also I never really just got in, because nothing like really pulled me in that far. But they're a band that I need to go back and I need to really sit with the Stones for a long time.
Well, that's what's funny is that you mentioned that because when Chad was here and we started talking about the Beatles and we kind of were on that too. And then it immediately went to the Stones.
Yep.
Because it's like these two camps.
Yeah.
It's like you got the people who are all in on the Beatles and are like, fuck the Stones. And then it's like.
This is the first thing I'm doing tomorrow morning is going back and hitting play and finishing your and Chad's conversation. Because I didn't quite get there yet. Oh my God. Yeah. So then next, Chad and I have to have a conversation.
Oh God. I'll go tell him to listen to this one.
But yeah, it's just, it's just interesting. But I mean, there's just, if you're, I guess I'm not even going to say this like this dogmatically thing. Cause speaking of coming from the church, I hate dogmatic statements nowadays. Like if you're not this, then you're this. Okay. But for me personally, as a songwriter, I feel like you have to take everything in and like be able to siphon that some way and have it go through you and have it come out in some way or another. Because, and I thought about doing this on like an Instagram thing where you can do those multiple choice things. I always wanted to do this where kind of get like, my tiny little corner of the internet, my tiny little following, but what they would assume that I've grown up listening to as opposed to what I did. Yeah. Like, so it'd be like, between the two, like, do you think I listen to more Roy Orbison in my life or more My Chemical Romance? The answer is My Chemical Romance. Yeah. I've listened to way more My Chemical Romance and Weezer. Yeah. And I mean, all sorts of random, Fiery Furnaces, like weird indie bands and stuff like that. Then I've listened to I love Elvis. Yeah. I've listened, the one I have, if you listen to songwriting, you'd be like, oh, he's probably like Johnny Cash a lot. I've listened to a lot of Johnny. Okay, so that's one thing I really have listened to a lot. But like Marty Robbins, a lot of these things that you could peg in songwriting, especially for like Lado De Loma. I haven't really taken a lot of that in. It's just like I've taken like the surface level of it, Yeah. Buddy Holly and stuff like that. Like I like Buddy Holly and I like Roy and I like Chris Isaac is another one. Oh yeah. But like, I basically only know I want to fall in love. Like, I kind of only know that song and like a couple of, but the funny thing is like, and then understanding and all that back from who knows how long ago we started talking about how coming to my sound is just finding out like, what have I kind of came to a point, like, what do I want to sound like? What's natural and what do I want to sound like? And it happened to be not necessarily always like all the things that I've listened to. Like, I listened to so much all through high school, like I was a product of my time. So like I spent most of my time listening to Death Cab for Cutie and Postal Service. Yeah. Blink-182. My first like favorite band was Metallica. Yeah. I was like a 9-year-old kid and I was sneaking Metallica albums, like going to buy them from Sam Goody or the Warehouse Music, like all this stuff that's like so far, like oldies were fine, like K-Earth 101, all that stuff. Like, yeah, like it was there and like, yeah, right on. But like, that wasn't what like, like I've listened to more Tool than I have Elvis. Yeah. Way more Tool than I have Elvis. But you listen to my music and be like, it's nothing like Tool. But that's like, that's a lot of the way. But like, and then sometimes it shows through. Like I love Chuck Berry, and then Mary Jane and Susie Lee was just my best attempt at writing a Chuck Berry song. Sure, that's it. Like so, sometimes it'll poke through real obviously. Yeah, Gone for Good. That was my best attempt at writing a Graham Parsons tune. Yeah, but like a lot of the time, it's like your influences, and going back to kind of the point I was trying to make is like as a songwriter, you have to be able to take a lot of stuff in. And so like I could take the Beatles in really easy because I've studied Beatles, not just like music and like chord charts and things like that, but like interviews. Like every interview I can find of them as a group, them solo on YouTube, and just listening to what they thought, what they talked about, the stories behind the songs. Yeah. Like especially George Martin, like in his as a producer and like all that. But so yeah, you take that in somebody like your big boy, like your big guy influences, like those are like the big main key players. But like you have to be able to take like Rage Against the Machine and stuff like that, like stuff where it's like that being able to like say something about the times. Now they're just way more aggressive.
Super aggressive.
How do you peel it back?
Also super creative.
Oh my God.
Aggressive
so
and creative. Yeah.
Like, yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
But like, so those things that you have to be, to kind of, I mean, or like Enya.
Yeah.
Like stuff like,
Yeah.
I love all that stuff.
Yeah.
Or even, and then, from a musician standpoint, like Frank Sinatra, he wasn't writing his own stuff, but the way that Frank could go and sing and interpret a song and stuff like that. Like I listened to so much Sinatra as like a high school kid because I had to do a report my sophomore year
I would say it was 1950s. Like, why? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so I was just like 14, 15 years old. And and Sinatra was obviously a big part of the 50s. Well, I mean, he was a big part of 40s, 50s, and 60s. Basically until he died. He was just a big part of the world.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he was a part of and then I just started listening. I went to Barnes and Noble and bought like a greatest hits record, and as part of just my like presentation for my report, whatever. But what was I doing? A decade report on the 1950s in my sophomore year. That's like something you do in your like 5th grade. Anyways, I was 15 doing that kind of stuff. But no, I didn't. Anyways, so that though, yeah, and like I got super into like, and so then hearing and understanding, but then I knew like, oh, he didn't write this stuff, but at that same time, then I was really into Johnny Cash and him writing a lot of that stuff, and then seeing the side of like, yeah, he was a limited performer. He was a limited musician.
Absolutely.
Super limited vocally, musically, but God, that guy could tell a story. And the main thing was whether he wrote it, and he wrote most of them, or he was telling somebody like Boy Named Sue, where he didn't write that tune, or 25 Minutes to Go, or something like that, or he didn't. But man, that guy could, like, he made it his own, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so you take you've got to be able to take all of these things in and find a way to get them out. And like a lot of rap music, I listen to tons of rap music. Yeah. Cadence and like just the way, oh my God. And like, so when you're right, and like your melody and the cadence and the words you pick and like the way that they fall within the melody, you want to convey the meaning behind what you're saying, but you want to say it the right way melodically, but even rhythmically, the cadence of it has to like that, all of it.
Yeah.
Like you have to
find the right words that are going to put that puzzle together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and sometimes it just comes natural and you get lucky.
Yeah.
But then other times it's like, you have to kind of sit with it and like kind of be like Dr. Dre with a pen and a pad in the lab.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
In the lab with a pen and that. But like that, and kind of get back down to it and find a way, because, that stuff it does matter. And like you can get lost in it, and it could kind of push you to the point of where it paralyzes you. But even then, I mean, you're a songwriter.
But in practice, it's like anything else. In practice, it just like my you talk about going down like the YouTube just interviews of like rabbit holes and all that stuff. Like for me, like Jason Isbell, Sturgill Simpson, like those, Jason Isbell in particular, like there's not a YouTube interview that exists that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
And but because for me, he's like that one that's regardless of whether or not, especially in like more recent times, like he's one that's tackled a lot of like in his more recent music, a lot of very current things.
Yeah.
And even when his takes aren't things that I agree with necessarily.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I have so much respect for the way he's able to do it.
Yeah.
And like, and his storytelling like for me that's the reason why I fell in love with country music was the storytelling side.
Yep.
Being able to tell a story and like take someone on a journey through a song or through a record.
Yeah.
And even going back to things that you mentioned prior, like when you're writing something that is, and you're asking yourself like, well, like, oh, I'm feeling this, but someone else is what X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
The ability to do that and capture your moment, but to leave the open-endedness for everyone else to put themselves in it. And regardless of what their details are, the overall embodiment of what it feels.
Yeah.
Like we're all gonna know how that feels. And I could put myself in that story.
Yeah.
As I'm singing along to it or I'm listening to it. And that's the story that kind of envelops because now I'm in the story.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, like, for me, like, that's why, like, people like Isbell, like, I look to them for that bar and hearing their conversations about how they stumble on their songs and that same thing where it's like sometimes they just hit, and then there's other times where it's like you're wrestling it, and you're trying to figure out how to make the cadence and the words and the story all line up
exactly,
and make it something.
And how you get where you're like, oh shit, I already said that word in this song. I don't want to say that word again. If it's like a key word, like you don't want to say that again. You know, you can use articles and different things like that. Again, you can say the and stuff like that all over the place. But then again, do you want to start this song again with I? You want to start with that again? Like, how many songs do you have that start with I? Like, what are you so all into yourself? Like all these things where you kind of go back and you look at, and it's like, but that's a huge thing. It's not like boxing your listener out, where you make it so specific that they're more just like looking in through the window at what you're experiencing. Whereas if you don't box them out, you take that wall away. They kind of can be right there, and they're in there, and they're like, oh, that's a huge thing.
I love Sturgill has one of those lines. He mentions, and one of the lines ends with Bronco, and then he comes back, and in your head, like I remember the first time I heard that, I'm like, where's he going with this? Yeah. And he comes back around and acknowledges that there's nowhere to go with it and says, I'm still going to be looking for a word that rhymes with Bronco. Yeah. And it's like one of those, and you're just like, it's like, well, you could go and like, oh, that was a cop out. Yeah. But the way that you navigated to get to this thing to be like, I just use Bronco and I know there's nothing to rhyme with it. And I'm going to come circle back around and I'm going to tell you there's nothing that rhymes with Bronco because I already know you're thinking it. Yeah.
That's literally, that's stand-up comedy. Yeah. That's literally, then that's another thing. You have to, stand-up comedians have a way of doing that. Oh yeah. Of being able to take a story and like, it's the same thing in country music. A lot of these songs, and they have punchlines at the end of their song. It's basically one long stand-up comedy routine. Yeah. Where you're kind of having, and whether it's whether you're going to laugh at the end, whether you're going to cry at the end, he stopped loving her today. Oh yeah. It's a tragedy routine instead of a comedy routine. It's like that kind of thing where you like, and then the punchline you're like, oh my God, he died. Yeah. That kind of thing where you're like, I live for those, exactly, like those songs. And that's like, so those things you absorb as a songwriter. And that's like that kind of stuff like Sturgill with that, like, and he gets back around and it's like, no, it's not a cop out. Like you could look at it as a cop out, but it's like, no, he solved the puzzle. Mm-hmm. He goes, I don't want to get rid of that line. As a songwriter, I can't get rid of that line. Yeah. So it stays. And like, damn, I got a job to try and fit the rest of the song around it. Like kind of thing. And you get into that place where you're like, this one doesn't go. Like it's non-negotiable. This line can't leave. So I have to figure some way around it. And there are times where you get there and like, those are the, what happens, what ends up on the chopping block. There's certain things they can't go on the chopping block. Yeah. Like, nope, that one doesn't go. I don't care if I got to rewrite the whole damn song. Yeah. That line doesn't go there. But man, yeah, like that idea of that storytelling, and I love that kind of stuff. Honestly, one of my favorite, and it's not like a funny thing, but one of my favorite ones, speaking of all the way at the beginning, when I was talking about John Mayer covering Gravity as an 18-year-old in the Jumping Turtle in San Marcos, California, was one of my favorite songs of all time is Stop This Train by John Mayer on Continuum. Yeah. And it's one of the most, because I'm a really sentimental person, like super sentimental. Like if you went back and listened through our long ass conversation, how many dates, like specific dates I pull out, because I have a weird thing where I remember like just dates. I'm a very sentimental, and that whole song is just extremely sentimental of talking about like, I want to stop and I want to go back, where like the past is always kind of shines like gold. Like the past is because you're sentimental for those times and things like that. But he has a lyric in that song where he says, don't know how else to say it. Don't want to see my parents go. And I don't know I'll have to ask him how he wrote that song or how he wrote that line.
Yeah.
But like as a songwriter, you can almost put yourself in his shoes and go like, God, how do I convey the truth of like, I don't want to see my parents. Like I'm not looking forward to the time where my parents are gone and I'm left, like to kind of figure things, and don't know how else to say it. I don't want to see my parents go, like that kind of thing of just like, maybe, I don't know, maybe there are tons of lines scratched out on his piece of paper,
right?
Where he just was trying to figure out to say, oh, like, but then he kind of got to the point where he's like, I don't know how to say it. I just don't want to see him go.
Yeah.
Like kind of thing where it's like those
simple, honest,
so honest and just like where Bronco and like, shit, there's nothing that rhymes with Bronco, but like, you just kind of use it like, and then find a way to move on. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any, really, that's still ahead of me in my songwriting career of finding something like that.
Yeah. Super. There's so many guys out there just doing such, beautiful jobs in that. And like Jason Isbell, he has a song called, If We Were Vampires. And that's a song. If you don't know that song, you should go listen to that song.
Okay.
But it is such a trip because he's kind of taking this idea and he's flipping it.
Okay.
He's flipped it and it in the most powerful way because it's like this whole thing about like essentially like the fact that life comes to an end, like it being a blessing that at some point in time, the life of my spouse and I end.
Yeah.
And how if we were vampires, how like maybe we wouldn't hold each other's hands or maybe we wouldn't do this thing. And it's, or like all these different things are kind of taking place and it kind of puts it in that perspective. And he has a couple of those lines that just like give me chills just thinking about it because it's like everyone gets it. Yeah. And it's like these thoughts that are just like, I never, or maybe you have thought about that in that way, but it's like just a way to be able to flip a narrative and upside down. Yeah. Like what's the common thing? Yeah. And like, how do I talk about loving my spouse, but I'm going to actually just talk about my spouse dying. Yeah. And the ability to kind of shift that.
Yeah. That's a crazy, like, okay, if like time is the one thing that we know is like limited. Yeah. Like, Bezos has unlimited money. Right. He has limited time. Absolutely. It's the one commonality in humans. Yeah. It's like you can have unlimited money, land, anything, but time is the one thing that's limited. So that affects the way that we interact. Mm-hmm. It's the reason we say, I love you a lot. Yeah. Because you need that person to know because time's limited because if you never say it and they're gone and their time's up, then it's like, well, like kind of those things. So like, that's a beautiful sentiment. Yeah. You explain it and you go, oh, talking about being a vampire. And it's like, no, the sentiment is like, that's gorgeous. Yeah. Like that's such a very, it's a great thing. And you put yourself in and go, oh, what a creative way to think about it. Like, if time was just infinite, would I still interact the same way with like people? Like, it's a trippy thing. Super trippy. Who puts their brain around that?
I don't know. You know what's interesting though, not to go off too side, but like hearing him talk about writing that song is also like one of those. It's super cool to see because his wife's a songwriter, and so he's often uses her as kind of a litmus test to kind of see and stuff like that. And he talks about how for like a week straight he's trying to play her this song. And he's like, I can't. He's like, I couldn't get past the first verse. I just start bawling. Crazy. And he's like, I just can't even get the song out. Yeah. And it's such a trip to listen to stuff like that about these people who are so like, they're writing these things. They're very moving to them too. Yeah. And it's not just this trickery. Yeah. Like, oh, let me put this thing out because let me write this thing so I can fuck everyone else up.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, no, like they got fucked up in the process. And
Dude, that's crazy. That talks. Speaking of, you mentioned broken record and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
The one that Malcolm's talking to. Remember where he's talking to Jack White about Elvis?
No, I haven't listened to that one.
He's talking about, or maybe that was a revisionist history, and that's what led to going to them doing broken record. No, I think it was revisionist history. That's why. So Malcolm Gladwell. Also, he and Rick Rubin do Broken Record. I don't know if Malcolm's even still part of it. Maybe he isn't. But anyways, but what eventually led them to Broken Record was Malcolm Gladwell was having people on Revisionist History, his podcast, and he had Jack White, and they were talking about an Elvis song, and obviously Elvis didn't write the tune, but they were talking about the ideas that when the sentiment was too close to the heart, the songs became easier to forget. Your mind, almost like as a defense mechanism, like didn't let you go there.
Interesting.
Like made you like so, and he had these other musicians, some of these country. It wasn't Brandy Carlisle. It was somebody though, like some. It was a few just different. There was these killer songwriters in Nashville, and there are these three ladies on there, and they had like this beautiful song that they wrote. It was talking about your kids growing up and stuff like that. But anyways, these songs that hit close to home, the idea behind it though, like what you're talking about, Jason Esbill, and how that when it like you can't even get the song out, and they're forgetting the lyrics on the spot because they hit too close to home.
Their body's like,
it's just like no. Like because they're going to start welling up, like kind of thing. So it's like they. Like what is it, you know, and maybe it's their like they feel themselves about to start crying, so they're trying to suppress that, and then when you're trying to suppress that, it's kind of hard to get your memory to you know kind of kick in. But yeah, there's the idea, but there's this really it's this Elvis song, I wonder if you're standing there, what does he say? He's like, are you lonesome tonight? So that's the tune. And then there's like a little, I forget what you call it, like a epilogue or something. Shit, I can't remember. In the middle of the song where he just starts talking.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I wonder if you're lonesome tonight. And he starts talking about, you know. And anyways, so they go through these live performances where Elvis has to play this song. And he just can't remember that part. And they said that it coincides with a time where he and Priscilla were kind of going through a rough patch, where he maybe like associated it too closely, like it hit too close to home. So, I mean, there are takes where he's playing this show and it's, I mean, in front of thousands of people, and he's like laughing hysterically because he can't remember. And it's like a super emotional, and he sounds like a madman just laughing. But Elvis had all sorts of like mental illness issues and everything. Like, bless the man, but he had all his own issues and everything. But you listen to these like takes, these live takes of him doing this song where it just was a little bit too close to home, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, he could sing, it's now or never, come home. He could do that all day long. But then it came to the song where it's like talking about like, if you're lonesome and like, I wonder if you're thinking about me while we're not together kind of thing. And he just can't. He just keeps forgetting it. Yeah. Like kind of thing. And you could chalk that up to, you know, he's Elvis and as a musician and everything, you know, you think about all the songs you have to memorize as a singer and stuff like that. You try, but then there's a whole nother thing of like, that's a certain song that you kept messing up. Like there might be something behind. Anyways, but that's an interesting thing too in songwriting too, is like, you know, how close do you get to home?
Right.
Like how much do you put yourself in your songwriting? How much do
you reveal?
Yeah. Because it's easy to write a narrative, and it's easy to even maybe put a little bit of your own story in from somebody else's perspective. But that's a whole nother thing. And I think some people can do it really well, you know, and maybe get away with it. But I think it's a tough thing. That's a hard thing, I think, as a songwriter to decide, you know, when it comes to, oh man, and this just so goes, like I would be talking about this with like sad music and wearing shirts that say make music sad again and stuff like that. But hell, man, sorrow is just a strong emotion. Yeah. And it fuels some of the best music that's ever been written. You know, I think I was talking with somebody about this the other night. It was Aiden or something like that. We were talking about, I mean, a lot of the greatest songs that have been written out of place of heartbreak in one way or another.
Yeah.
It might not be your woman left you, but it might be, the world is falling apart. It just, your heart can break in a lot of different ways. And, a lot of, where you look at Johnny Cash, a lot of great songs that came out of him were just times of turmoil. It's like, it's almost like songwriters need to continue to be in
that's
fucked up situations to keep writing.
It's so funny you say that too, because I have, there's people I've played with in the past and stuff like that who are like that as songwriters.
Yeah.
Like, they like for them to be inspired, they have like more often than not, they have situations that had to be like their inspiration had to become from some sort of like fucked up situation.
You have to be unsatisfied.
Yeah. And, which is, I mean, granted, I will say that cause you're kind of writing reactively versus, something came up and I was inspired and I'm reacting. And that's a place versus like a lot of stuff we talked about earlier from a more proactive side of like honing in more on like the crafts of saying like, well, I'm not always going to feel inspired all the time. Yeah. But the ability to still convey it and to do it and to practice it without maybe going through the experience is like a whole nother beast.
Oh, it is. Like, it absolutely, I feel like it is, for me personally, it's definitely easiest for me to write songs when I'm in a place of, I mean, like sorrow in one way or another. Like I'm unsatisfied with whatever's going on. And there's a lot of fuel for songwriting when you're balancing a lot in your life, like me. So I'm pursuing a full-time career in music while working a full-time job. And above all of that, first and foremost, I'm a husband and father. So that's just it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot mentally strenuous because, you have to do your day job well. Yeah. So that you don't lose it. Because if you lose it, like a lot of other things crumble. Like that's just where, you got to keep that going. But you have to be able to still at the same time stay inspired and feed that, because that might be what pays the bills, but what makes you is you're an artist that works a full-time job. Like you're not a whatever your job is XY who also is a part-time. That's not the way I look at it. I'm not a part-time artist in that way. Like that's who I am. And the other thing that I do to keep myself and my family afloat is what I do as a necessity. But I guess that's hard. They're both necessities. But yeah, so you can hear me trying to parse it out right now. God, it's a fucking crazy balance. Yeah. That's just tough as all. I'm not the only one. There are hundreds of thousands like that. Right. But so in this stage, it's like, man, like, yeah, there's a lot you got to balance that. And you got to make sure that you're being like a great partner and you're being a good father and like all of those things. And because you've only got so much of yourself and you only have so much emotion and so much like attention. And when every single day you're tasked with dividing that equally to keep all things afloat and like, and not looking at it as like, I need to keep my relationships afloat like that. But, but in the same sense, like, you get what I'm saying, where you need to make sure that they understand and those people in your life feel loved, but your responsibilities are also met. Right. God, man. Yeah. God, that's a lot. And
well,
it
it's
makes
interesting.
You spin.
I like, I have people I've talked to who struggle with that in terms of being the artist. And they struggle with feeling held down because they go, well, I got to go work a job 9 to 5, 5 days a week. And then I have this girlfriend and she's taking up all my time. And so all these things, and like, well, I'm going to get rid of these things because they're taking away from me being able to spend my time in crafting my artistry. Yeah. And the conversation I always have is that what you don't get is that those are the things where you're going to be fed to feed the artist
Yeah.
that's inside. Because when you take all those things out, you're not experiencing anything anymore. You're not experiencing stress when you don't have a job.
Yeah.
And juggling your family and juggling those things. Like, what are you experiencing that you're going to have to like, and on top of that, anything you are experiencing is not going to necessarily be relatable to anybody else because most people are going to be out there juggling and doing all the things. So it's like now you have to fabricate.
Yeah.
And so it is this weird catch-22 of feeling like, oh, my job's pinning me down and I don't have enough time.
You need it.
Yeah.
You need you need struggle as a songwriter.
Yeah.
If you're happy and perfectly content, your songs they're shit. They're going to suck.
Yeah.
It's just like you can maybe get, I mean, like that's, and I guess I shouldn't say that dogmatically, but like there's a good chance.
Yeah.
If you got not a care in the world, like I would like to look into it because one of my favorite songs, like this Simon and Garfunkel song, Feeling Groovy. It's the 59th Street Bridge song or whatever. It's like, you know, I got no deeds to do, no promises to keep. I was talking about like just feeling groovy, you know, kicking down the cobblestone. And I'm like, I wonder how he was really feeling when he wrote that song. Maybe he was happy and he got a great song out of it.
Maybe.
Okay, we'll say maybe. There is a margin.
But even that,
if you're really,
I would say that, let's say like, I could see you having inspiration in that from coming from a place of feeling weighed down. And then that first period of feeling free.
Relief.
And that free. But how long are you going to feel that?
Or Here Comes the Sun. Know, George Harrison.
Yeah, how long are you going to feel that before that well runs dry?
Exactly.
You know?
It's definitely like the struggle is just, it's funny. There's that whole, when we were in high school, emo music came out, right? It's funny that it got pegged as emo music, but it's like, I mean, all music is emo music.
Yeah.
Name me a good song that doesn't have some.
I mean, that stuff was extra emo.
It was extra emo. it got into some details that you're like, oh, okay, well, you know, what crying on the pages of your book or whatever. Whatever. You probably could have said that. They just did convey it well. They just They probably could have been maybe a little more poetic in their songwriting, and maybe they would have been better. And that's why it died. Just kidding. I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, it's interesting to, I don't know. It would be really interesting, and it's hard to do like on the spot, but to think back and kind of look and run it like a whole list of songs and like a lot of my favorite songs and how many of them are like happy, you know, and even songs that are happy, that are like happy sounding songs. I mean, so speaking, like I could speak on what I know or what I've written. So like Sad Boy is like, that's a happy kind of song.
Yeah.
At that point in my life, I was like, we were living with my sister-in-law in like a studio where me and my wife and my child were all in like one room. And granted, still bigger scope, much better than a lot of people have it. I lived in Southern California in a studio, you know, but still, it wasn't ideal. It was like, you know, and I worked a job that I just did not enjoy doing. And not that it was like, you know, I worked with great people and stuff. And it's just like, I just didn't want to be doing that at the time, you know? And so it was like, that's a happy song, but I wasn't content at that point. God, I was so bummed. I was looking for ways out, all left, right, up, down, center. So it makes me wonder how many songs that I think back are like these like nice, happy songs. Like, were they really written from a point of like, I don't know, or is just sorrow the fuel of it all, you know? And I don't think so. I don't think it's a blanket statement. You can't say that, but,
It just happens to be a lot of songs.
Yeah, it just happens to be. I think a lot of it. Yeah, I think it does come from that place.
I think every country song is jokingly about how I lost my dog, my wife, and my truck broke down.
Exactly, because it's like, it comes from loss in some way or another. But yeah, and it's funny, and it's like, I'm glad though. Like, I'm happy this conversation goes this way, because a lot of the times, one of the things that I get worried about, like as a songwriter, is because it's all you can do as a musician is you're based on feedback, right? I mean, is it not? As a drummer, as a songwriter, as a singer, it's feedback. It's when you get off the stage, what's the person shaking your hand say to you?
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of the times, you know, they're like, oh, you know, thanks. And like, you know, oh, like, you know, Francis, you have such a beautiful voice and things like, you know, and I'm like, oh, thank you. You know, I really appreciate that. Thank you. You know,
Yeah.
I try to sing well. I do my best
Yeah.
to make sure that I'm singing well for everybody. But what I don't want getting lost in that is like, but did you hear what the song said?
Right.
You know? Because like,
I'm singing for that. That's like,
that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I'm just like, yeah. But like, could you tell I was sad? Just,
yeah.
You know, just kidding. But that kind of thing of just like, I like that. Yeah. It's nice. I'm just glad we had more of a conversation about songwriting than singing.
Yeah.
This is great. Because it's like, this is much more encouraging to me. I'm like, okay, then people do pay attention to the song more than just like, oh, he kind of sounds like Roy Orbison. It's like,
well, I mean, you're gonna get that, and you're gonna get people that never breach anything below, you know, beneath the surface.
Yeah.
And which is, you gotta, unfortunately, you have to be able to kind of. That's why it's so tricky.
Yeah.
Because you can't leave those people out either.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, if that's it, if it harkens you back to a time and you're like, I hear this, it's like, absolutely, please come and stay.
Yeah.
Like, for sure. But yeah, that's definitely not the reason why I'm not like, oh, how can this song, you know, sound more like, how can I sing it better? Like, if I write this melody does it? Yeah, because I even found like a lot of the stuff that I was writing recently, like even melodically, like might not lend the most exciting vocal performance. A lot of the tunes that, like, even the stuff that I really
like if I had written this different, I could project my voice in a more desirable way.
I could do more that would be like, oh wow, look, there's that. Oh, but it was like, you know, but yeah, a lot of times where I will definitely, like, that will go to the wayside before just trying to say something.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, that's great.
Well, and I will say that as like, that's how, I mean, I view you as a songwriter first.
Oh, thank God.
I mean, you sing, obviously, like that's a thing, but
I do sing songs.
Yeah. But it is one of those, like, but that's always been the way that I've looked at it, in that. But that is, you know, that's another thing too, is, you do have a lot of people though that, like, not to undermine what they have to say, but in the sense that, like, again, music is being the subjective thing, is that there is so many great artists that are out there who, you know, and that's their thing is okay, now how do I fine tune this song to project my voice to be this thing, you know. And so there's definitely that side of it too. I just, for me, like the songwriting, the creativity, and the lyrical side and cadence and all those things is always like the thing I'm thinking of most.
What grabs?
Yeah.
Like there's some, speaking of like where we came from, Christian artists, there's some that I can think of off the top of my head that just, like, I know by the end of this song, you're just going to be yelling that chorus at the octave above whatever you sang it the first time.
Oh, yeah.
And boo. Come on. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, it's subjective. That just doesn't vibe with me.
Right.
But other people, that's what they want to hear.
Absolutely.
They'll hear the same thing over and over, but this time it just took up a notch and it just got louder and higher and more impressive vocally.
Yeah. But I will say that too, in defense of that, is that does something emotionally too.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why that tool is used in the church.
Yeah.
And there's because that is priority number one. The church is to try and move people spiritually. I feel like I said, like, try to move people spiritually, but that is essentially like kind of
that's the goal.
Yeah. And so so that is, you could do it and it's done with the guitars and other things. And then if you have the ability to, the ability for a voice to do that too, is like, it is a powerful thing. And, it's just different. Yeah. And, that's because I'm one of those people, like, I am very music is very much an emotional thing for me. That's the only way I approach music. And it's probably the same reason why I never learned music.
Yep.
In the sense that, like, for me, it was always a response to an emotional thing. So when I play, I'm reacting to how I feel like what's happening and what we were trying to make it feel.
Yep.
And but yeah, there's stuff like that too, where there's music that does nothing for me lyrically.
Yeah.
The lyrical content of it may not even be relevant.
Yeah.
And it may not be something I care about, and I might think the subject matter is terrible.
Yeah.
But there's still things that happen in a performance, in the way that someone can string you along.
Yeah.
And to do those things in the way that, like, they can, if done creatively, can kind of convey, like you said, convey the same thing.
Absolutely.
In the sense that, like, well, your lyrics were kind of shoddy.
Yeah.
But there's still a thing that happens.
But there's something
because music without words still moves people.
Absolutely.
Which is why there's fucking weird, freaky music in the back of scary movies, because really the only thing making it scary is the music. You know, and it's in the same thing, you know, and behind every video you see on Facebook or Instagram of some inspirational thing is that the thing that's happening is only about 2/3 of the inspiration. And then the other 2/3 might even be an aggressive. But the music that happens to be playing in the background is just doing this thing that's like that. And so that's kind of where I see a lot of that stuff too. It's
absolutely.
Like, which is why, like, in so many of those things in the church have always had like that type of, because you're like, okay, well, we can just soar it.
Yeah.
And then
let's just keep building. And eventually, But it's, you know, funny. And even another aspect, even something different that's come out of COVID, songwriting wise too, was I got hooked up with, through Kimmy Bitter, hooked up with Al Howard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, so Al's got this project that he started doing COVID where he's doing 100 songs. So it's Alfred Howard Writes. And so he's written all these lyrics and he sends them out to artists and he just says, hey, write if you'd like to write a song with these lyrics. And so me as a songwriter who's always just written my own lyrics and really never had any input. That's one of the things that, like, I just really it's really, like, I just don't budge. I don't think I've ever budged with anything lyrically. I've never had somebody go, oh, well, what if you said this? Nope. Sorry.
It
might be better, but it just doesn't convince me the same way that I convince me.
Yeah.
And so I got linked up with Al and he was like, yeah. So he explained what the project was, what I just explained. And at first I was like, man, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I've never done that before. You know, I've never written with somebody else's art essentially and tried to put it to my, so, but I was like, you know, it's 2020. What the hell, man? Like, I'm down for all sorts of new shit this year. Like, you know, don't knock it till you try it. So, yeah, I took a whack, and man, that's been something that's really been fun, especially as somebody that is so, like, holds that kind of thing so close. Like, I like to write my own lyrics and stuff like that, you know. That's been a really good exercise of just being able to take somebody else's lyrics. And Alfred, he's a great writer. He writes great lyrics. And more than that, like, I mean, he's like, he listened to some of my music and then he wrote lyrics that he thought would match the tone of what I write in. I mean, that's how well, like, he's kind of, and so it kind of, like, it made it that much easier where I'm like, oh, it's already kind of like in the tone.
Oh, that's interesting. So it wasn't like, hey, I wrote this song and, like, he, like, listened to your stuff and, like, he's like, I'm gonna write a song in the vein of, like, maybe something that he would do. That's a trip. I was like, wow, like, that's really cool and very, like, so it made it more seamless. You know, it made it like, oh, but yeah, like, you know, on the songwriting aspect, like, that was tough at first. I was like, I don't know how to do this. I kind of left and I was like thumbing through stuff, you know. The day he sent stuff over, I was like, you know, lyrics, and I was like working and kind of like picking through some stuff, and then I was like, but
but it didn't click right away. It had to I had to come back, and then eventually I think it was I don't know, a few weeks later, then I was like, hey, I think, I've got something here. We did something anyways. But yeah, that's been another trippy thing, as a songwriter.
Yeah, I've heard a few of those from different people have done with that. That's cool.
Yeah, Ellis has done some, and Kimmy did one, and a bunch of people. Those are and it's it's a really cool thing that he's doing. That it's just another cool way of just, and I've heard you talk. I mean, you're talking to Hollander and Shane Hall, and just talking about ways of moving forward, in the pandemic, and it's freaking awesome how people are moving forward, and that's how Al's doing it. He's just it's 100 songs, 100, and now I think he just hit 50, so he hit the halfway mark, and his mom's doing all the artwork for everything. Wow. But it's what a cool, inspiring thing.
Are they all with different artists?
Yeah. I mean, there's some that do repeats.
Okay, I was going to say, because what's crazier is how are you going to find 100 people?
Artists, yeah.
To
no, there are definitely a few that do repeats and stuff like that. I've done a couple, and I'm working on a third with him right now.
No way. That's killer.
Just because, I love it. I like this. I love the stuff he writes, and it feels very, I just wouldn't be able to. Yeah. I'm a nice human, but I wouldn't be able to get on board if I was just I can't sing these things.
Sure.
I just wouldn't do it. But Al's a great writer.
Yeah.
He's just writes great lyrics. So it makes it easy to get on board with that. But yeah, that's one thing where I'm man, that's cool. And it kind of gave me inspiration when I was writing, and then into spring, and then into summer, and then I did into fall. Then I was I got to finish it and do into winter kind of thing, as well. I couldn't force it, but if it came, I was because I looked at even Al, I'm man, he's got this big old giant project he's doing. I should be able to finish my 4-song project. this dude
he's writing 100 songs. I can do it
for
4. I should be able to make it work.
I could do 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that's another cool thing that has been kind of rad to be a part of.
Is there a name to that project? So if that way people are listening.
Alfred Howard Writes.
Alfred, okay.
So it's they will release on Bandcamp, and you could subscribe to the email, and it's a paid subscription, and you'll get the songs and stuff, but then eventually they go onto Spotify as well. So I think volumes 1 through 4 are on Spotify right now.
Okay.
And they're increments of 10.
Okay.
So 40 songs of the 100 song project are on Spotify right now. Then I think the other 10 will be released on Spotify in the next couple weeks, I think. But yeah, so it's Alfred Howard Writes.
All right, I'll try and remember to put a link.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. So it's been really cool. Something that I never thought I would really do.
Mm-hmm.
But
I find that it's interesting too, is definitely something. Well, especially it's weird too, because I spent enough time in Nashville, and in Nashville, that's just their world. That's their game. It's writers, and they are constantly churning out songs. Granted, also, and they're doing it very commercially, and they're doing it with very intent purposes, and for people and stuff like that. But a lot of people who are coming out, they might have, most of the songs are songs they wrote, or maybe most of the songs are songs that they didn't necessarily write. Yeah. And it's such a different game out there. And it is funny that that's so, it's here, in our world, that is so foreign. Yeah. And the idea of singing someone else's song is this thing well, I write songs, so why would I sing someone else's song?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's funny, it's being out there, it's I write songs, and then they're but other people write good songs, and I'm down to sing them. Yep. And make money.
Dude, that's such a trip. That's funny too, because even that podcast that I was talking about, those songwriters that were on that podcast that were talking about that, they were in fact songwriters. Yeah. That's what they do. They're just churning out great songs in Nashville. Yeah. And they're Nashville songwriters.
Man, that's how Stapleton, that's dude, you could make the money, or not the money, but the songs he wrote for so many artists out there, and he was he was like the artist songwriter. He was like the guy everyone looked to. And then now, and then it's like, and then he's like, oh, cool, I'm gonna start doing my own stuff now.
Yeah.
And then he's gonna like fuck every one of those people off of the charts.
Yep. Yeah.
He's like, I'm tired. I'm done writing songs for you guys.
Yeah.
Or I don't know if that's exactly how it happened, but it's like one of those where it's like, it's, it's just cool to see that these guys that are kind of tucked away and they wrote all these songs that you hear all the time.
Yeah.
And you don't even think about it because their name's tucked somewhere in a credits thing. I mean, that check still cashes.
Yeah.
But whether or not we see them.
Yeah.
But
they're not the one that gets the credit when it's comes out of your speakers in your car.
No.
For those of you out there that still listen to the radio.
Yeah.
God bless your soul.
Well, even just the spot, like even streams, stuff like that. I mean, streams don't pay a lot, but when there's like billions of them.
Yep. Then you're good.
Yeah.
You're all right.
Yeah.
You get your cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. Yeah. It's a whole different, man. Yeah. That is a different world.
Yeah. I actually got a couple. I'm going to Nashville next week.
Oh, nice.
I'm going like Thursday through Tuesday.
Okay.
And I got a couple podcasts lined up out there.
Oh, nice.
I'm really excited about.
Sweet. You got the travel rig?
Same rig. I just got to figure out how to like pack it to make it make sense.
There you go.
So
yeah,
pretty streamlined.
Yeah.
It's not too bad. Yeah. I don't know. I figured it was like I was going out there.
Yeah.
And I was like, why not?
Might as well.
Like, why wouldn't I do that?
That's a good call.
Yeah.
It's just a good way to think about it. Yeah, it's just kind of doing it. Yeah, wherever you go.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely been a thing that it's like, well, for me in this time too, of being someone who's busy all the time.
Yeah.
And then having not been busy.
Yeah.
This has occupied such a space that's like fulfilled so much of that for me.
Good.
And being able to like do something and feel like I'm churning. But then also out of nowhere, as soon as I started doing this, there was a bunch of stuff that all of a sudden started popping up. And so it's been like a thing where it's like, oh, I'm doing a thing this night and now I have a rehearsal that night and I'm doing,
back to like, juggling.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, like my wife's like, cool, I'll see you Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I'm like, ugh.
You're like, yeah, for the day.
Yeah, for the day.
Oh my God.
That's probably accurate, actually, when I think about it.
Oh man, that's wild.
Yeah.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
We have one of her friends that if we don't go see my grandparents, my grandma, she has her best friend that she's been going to Thanksgiving with their family. Yeah. Kind of like adopted family almost. Yeah. And she's been going there for years. So
nice.
Yeah, we'll be cruising out there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it'll just be us and his mom and dad or whatever.
Hi.
How about you guys?
We're going up to Murrieta. My wife's family has all moved to Arizona. So they're coming to meet at my sister-in-law's fiance's house in Murrieta. So we're going out there, and then my family, we're all spread around.
Yeah.
I actually don't get to see any of my direct family at all on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I mean,
that's just how it goes.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better that way. I always joke about that with people because they're always like, it's like a thing where sometimes when people ask like, oh, so what's the deal with your family? And like my family dynamics always like a little too much to divulge into. Yeah. So it's one of those things where, and it's like this, like, oh, like, and you're like, no, think about this. I don't have to go. Like, you're just constantly telling me about all this drama you got to deal with, all this stuff. There's always things going on. And I was like, I don't got to deal with any of that.
And then they look and they're like, damn.
Yeah, like, damn it.
Wish I was Dolly.
Well,
that's so good.
Yeah. Well, shit, man. I think we're about 2.5 hours in.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah. You'll probably have to cut a lot of that.
We don't cut.
No?
No, I don't edit anything. No.
Wow. Sorry.
No, that's great.
Just rambled on.
No, it's great. I love it.
For a little while.
Yeah. Now you know why you have 2-hour podcasts that you've been listening to.
Yeah, that's true. Oh God, dude, don't even get me started. Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
Oh, yeah.
6 hours?
Yeah.
on the Eastern Front of World War II.
Dude,
catch me.
I love it.
Deep in that.
Dude, on the subject, you know what's funny is that, so like I do with most anything, I'm a talker when I'm just engaging with anyone in terms of like, I will let people in on anything I'm doing. It's just how I network or connect with people. And I'm never too scared to share too much.
Yeah.
So, but, and I golf quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so that happens a lot because you're playing with someone. If you get paired up with someone, you're playing with them for 4 hours maybe.
Yeah.
And dude, on more than one occasion, this has happened where people ask like, "Oh, what do you do?" and or whatever, and eventually stuff will come up, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing this podcast thing." And they're like, "Oh, that's cool." They're like, "Oh, just tell me it's not like one of those like Rogan things where it's like 3 hours long." And I'm like, "Yeah, the first one was 2 hours 45 minutes." And they're like, "Shit."
That's so good.
So, dude, it's happened so many times. I was like, and it's been a thing. And then but it's been interesting because they're like, dude, they're like, why? Like, how is it that you even have that much shit to talk about?
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
I'm like, dude, you'd be super surprised. But I love it because it isn't this thing where like showing up and it's like super compact and it's like, hey, I got this question to ask. And like, oh, okay, moving on to the next thing. Because like these are all the things that, like you said, sorry, but all the things that you would probably think to cut out are all the things that make it special for me.
Yeah.
And like being the one who's doing this, that's my priority.
Yeah.
Is that like, I'm kind of like I've liked to make it this thing that's like, well, what are all the things that are going to be interesting to me?
Yeah.
And like the more layers that kind of get peeled back and the deeper you get into it, like for me, it only gets better.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I mean, that's the way I am with podcasts.
Yeah.
I'm always in it for the long haul.
Yeah. Well, we got one, so
there we go. Yeah, if they skip around, you're lost at this point.
Yeah, you
try and skip forward. You're fucked, dude.
Well,
hell yeah. Yeah, thanks for having me over.
Absolutely.
This was great.
I hope we get to play music again soon.
God, dude. I know we're heading into the dark days now.
Don't know. I'm trying not to think about it.
Straight up, just like I'm looking at it, and it's like,
yeah.
They're telling us we're going back into we're going dark.
I'm not listening. La la.
I know,
la,
right?
La,
it's
la,
like,
la.
Oh man, it's heavy.
Yeah. Nope.
But yeah. Hopefully, real soon.
Yeah. Hopefully. God damn it.
Oh right. Man.
We out.
Later.
Remember the 3rd of November. The day that our great nation lost the plot. And I see no reason, this chaotic season